Well, if you're thinking about just what the brain can do, I like using just crazy gnarly examples. I used to work in clinic when I was trying to get into medical school. And once in a while these older folks, they would have dementia, parts of the brains would literally wither like the flesh would wither. It's not just the thinking and the electricity, right? And hidden painting abilities would come out. Anything difficult where you have think is good for your brain. If you ask Usain Bolt, how do I get stronger legs to run? It's intuitive, but the flesh in our skulls, it's meant to think and feel, and that is the power of self-growth, and it's a thinking machine, it's a thinking flesh that you actually have to use or to protect itself, because it's an energy hog, right? It's 3 pounds, but uses 20. If you're not using parts of it, you'll program itself to let those parts of the garden wither. So the diversity of thinking and the depth of thinking just one level past what you're used to is the way to keep the whole garden flourishing. And it is a garden in there. There's chemicals, there are things moving, there are different types of brain cells. It's not just neurons. So I would try to give that metaphor analogy, if you will, that it's a garden and you have to irrigate it and stimulate and tend to all the corners, particularly the ones you're starting to neglect. Maybe it's your left hand. Getting out of the box and engaging the recesses of your mind is the most important thing. And then you have then the creative things happen. You just sit down and have them happen. You've got to work and dream and go hard. And on top of that, something creative can happen. So is there a specific protocol? Like I know people have said brush your teeth with your left hand, or one of the coolest things I've ever heard about staving off dementia is to take dance class, because having to do bodily movements, but in a particular rhythm and learning new steps is like sort of the ultimate trifecta for 2:00 keeping the brain young. Absolutely. The minute you don't use your left hand, the right parietal lobe with the motor strip says, I'm not getting used much, I'll shave down that density of those brain cells a little bit. So that's where movement's important. So simple things like getting the mouse, using the mouse with your left hand and using your phone with your left hand, it's a powerful technique. And then the other thing is navigation. When you see old people and they lose their way home, well, that has a particular address. Also, many things are global in the brain, but navigation is in the temporal lobe and they have dementia in that area. Navigation, also as spatial awareness, is a function of the brain, and sometimes when we're on our phones too much we don't have that. So my kids, I don't look down. Not religiously or adamantly, but try to just remember our route and just look up and see how far you can get. I think those habits will help us as we get less young, and those are practical things we can do during the day. Brain training, it doesn't have to be some weird game that's not intuitive. I think brain training just means learning as a habit, one step past where you're comfortable. If you're reading it, you know it, your brains, and it's an idle. If it's too hard, it's not even engaged. I'm not going to win this race. I'm not gonna kick in a second gear. So just like video games, just good enough to get to the next level, right? They don't hit you with the 5th level, the tilt level up front. It's level 1 to level 2, level 2 to level 3. That's what learning is. So despite your knowledge and intellect, it's just that level right beyond you that is brain training. So you don't have to buy an app, you just have to challenge yourself and think. Sleep is a tricky one. I spent a decade without sleep. Going Monday morning at 4 or 5 a.m., come home Tuesday at 7 p.m., and what you realize during that time is even if you can get a few hours of sleep, don't do it. If you could just get an hour to, sometimes it's better to stay up the whole night. Hence the story well worn between residents, they pass that on to each other, and the reason is the sleep disruption can be quite difficult on the brain. And so if you're going to get 5 good hours of sleep, going on to people who aren't in surgical training, maybe that's better than 7 hours of disrupted sleep where your phone is going off and different things are pinging your way. So that's one lesson I think people should understand. So this is not to lose weight, it's what nutrients to put inside you. Where if you have 1,000 people here, And you have 1,000 people here, and for 20 years they eat differently. What are the numbers of people with dementia, all other things being equal? It essentially says it doesn't have to be Mediterranean, it just has to be plants, like, as I might tell my kids.